Hey everyone, welcome back to Reliable Prepper. Today, we're covering a topic that tends to get a lot of attention in our prepper circles: bugging out. It's one of those strategies that a lot of people plan for, talk about, and even dream about. The idea of grabbing your bug-out bag, hitting the road, and surviving off your wits has a certain appeal. But here's the thing. Bugging out is much, much harder than most people realize. It's physically grueling, mentally exhausting, and full of unpredictable dangers. In most cases, it should be your last resort, not your first option. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll explore why bugging out is tougher than you think and what you need to consider before making that decision. So, stay tuned as we break down the hard truths about bugging out and how to be better prepared for any situation. So let's start with the physical reality of bugging out. A lot of people picture themselves just walking through the woods, maybe with a nice breeze in the air, carrying their bug-out bag like a cool action hero in a survival movie. But the truth is far more brutal. First off, you've got the weight of your bug-out bag. Now, if you've packed it right, and I'll get into packing later, your bag is going to weigh at least 30 pounds, possibly more. That's like carrying a small child on your back all day long. If you're not in shape, that bag will start feeling like a boulder after just a couple of miles. And the terrain isn't going to be forgiving either. Maybe you're walking over rocky paths, hiking uphill, or wading through streams. Every step is going to take effort, and the farther you go, the harder it gets. Now, combine that with unpredictable weather. Maybe you're hiking through the rain and your clothes are soaking wet, or maybe the sun is beating down and you're sweating bullets. Either way, your body is burning through calories and energy just to keep going, and exhaustion is going to set in fast. This is not just a walk in the park, it's a physical grind that requires stamina and resilience, but the physical strain is only half of it. Bugging out is mentally exhausting as well. Think about it. You're leaving your home, your comfort zone, everything that's familiar to you. You're walking into the unknown with no guarantees. Every decision you make is high stakes. Should you take this route or that one? Should you stop for the night or push on? Is it safe to trust the people you meet along the way? Or are they a threat? All of that mental stress can wear you down just as much as the physical exhaustion, and when you're tired and stressed, it's easy to make mistakes. And mistakes in a survival situation can be fatal. On top of that, you're constantly dealing with the unknown. What's around the next corner? Will you find clean water? Is the weather going to turn? That constant uncertainty takes a toll on your mental health, and over time it can lead to decision fatigue. You might find yourself second-guessing every choice you make, or worse, becoming paralyzed by fear and indecision. Bugging out requires you to stay sharp, and that's easier said than done when you're worn out, both physically and mentally. And then there's the environmental hazards. Let's say you're bugging out in a rural area. You're not just walking on smooth, flat roads, you're dealing with rocky terrain, steep inclines, rivers, and dense forests. All of that makes travel slower and more difficult. In an urban environment, it's no easier. You might face blocked roads, riots, or even law enforcement checkpoints. The environment itself becomes an obstacle. And don't forget about the weather. Cold rain can lead to hypothermia, while extreme heat can cause dehydration or heat stroke. Every element in your surroundings is working against you, making bugging out harder with every passing hour. But one of the most overlooked challenges of bugging out is not having a clear destination. So many people have a vague plan of heading to the hills or finding a safe spot in the wilderness, but without a specific, safe, and stocked location, that's just wandering. And wandering is dangerous. Without a defined goal, you're more likely to take unnecessary risks, waste time, and burn through your resources. Don't forget about the social isolation. Bugging out often means leaving behind your community, your neighbors, and maybe even your family. You're out there on your own or with a small group. That can get lonely fast, and the psychological strain of being isolated in a crisis can wear you down. Humans are social creatures, and when you're cut off from support, the weight of the situation feels that much heavier. Plus, you lose out on the collective knowledge, skills, and resources that a community can offer. So, before you decide that bugging out is the right move for you, ask yourself, are you really ready for the physical and mental toll it's going to take? Bugging out is not easy, and it's not something you should take lightly. Now that we've established how tough bugging out is, let's talk about when it's actually the right decision. Because the truth is, in most cases, sheltering in place is a much better option. Bugging out should only happen when you have no other choice. and here's why. If your home is stable and defensible and you've got a decent supply of food, water, and medical supplies, then staying put is often the safer move. Your home has the things you need: shelter, warmth, and security. You know the terrain. You know your neighbors. You're in control. Leaving all of that behind for the unknown is a huge risk. But there are situations where bugging out is the right move. For example, if there's an imminent physical threat like a wildfire, flood, or chemical spill, then staying in your home might become too dangerous. In these cases, getting out quickly is the best option. Another scenario where bugging out makes sense is if there's a total breakdown of law and order. If civil unrest turns violent and your area becomes overrun with looting, rioting, or armed conflict, then bugging out could be your only chance to avoid harm. Another situation that could force you to bug out is a biohazard like a truly dangerous pandemic or chemical weapons attack. If you're in an area with a high risk of infection or exposure, leaving for a more isolated rural location might be necessary to protect yourself and your family, but in most scenarios, staying put is the better option. Why? Because when you shelter in place, you're in a familiar environment. You've likely stockpiled supplies, you know the area, and you have the ability to defend your home. Bugging out, on the other hand, means leaving behind all of those resources and protections for an uncertain journey. So before you make any decisions, always weigh the risks. Is the immediate threat to your safety greater than the risks of bugging out? If the answer is no, then staying home is the smarter choice. And as always, make sure you have both plans ready. You need a plan for sheltering in place and a plan for bugging out if the situation forces your hand. Let's switch gears and talk about your bug-out bag. Now, I'm sure many of you already have a bug-out bag packed, or at least a checklist of what you think you'll need. But here's the thing, you don't need a ton of gear. In fact, the more stuff you pack, the harder your journey will be. What you really want is a streamlined, efficient kit that covers the essentials without weighing you down. First up, water. Water is your #1 priority, hands down. You'll need at least a 3-day supply of water for each person in your group, but you also need a way to purify more water on the go. A water filter like a Sawyer Mini or a Life Straw is a must-have. If you find water along the way, you can't just drink it without purifying it. Even clean-looking water can carry bacteria, parasites, and other contaminants that will knock you out fast. When it comes to food, you want lightweight, high-calorie options. Freeze-dried meals, energy bars, and packets of peanut butter are great choices. You're not looking for luxury here. You need calories to keep your energy up. Canned food, while durable, is too heavy to carry in large amounts, so stick to lightweight alternatives. Now, shelter is something you absolutely need to consider. You can't always count on finding an abandoned building or natural shelter. A lightweight tarp or emergency bivy sack should be in every bug-out bag. They're small, portable, and can provide basic protection from the elements. Next, there are a few other small but crucial items you don't want to forget. A signal mirror and whistle can help you attract attention if you're lost or in danger. Heavy-duty trash bags are another underrated tool. They can be used to waterproof your gear, collect rainwater, or even create a makeshift poncho in a pinch. These are lightweight and take up almost no space, but they can serve multiple purposes, making them a great addition to any bug-out bag. The key to packing your bug-out bag is to prioritize efficiency. You don't want to overpack and weigh yourself down with unnecessary items. Your goal is to keep your bag light enough to carry over long distances, but still have everything you need to survive. Stick to the essentials: food, water, shelter, and basic tools, and avoid throwing in gear you won't realistically use. The lighter your load, the faster and farther you can travel, which might be the difference between life and death in a survival situation. Now, having the right gear is one thing, but knowing where you're going and how you're going to get there is just as important, if not more. Bugging out is not as simple as just grabbing your bag and heading out the door. You need a clear plan and a well-thought-out route that will get you to safety as efficiently and safely as possible. But here's the reality. In most disaster scenarios, roads might be blocked, traffic might be gridlocked, and chaos could break out at any time. So, it's crucial to have multiple routes planned. You should have at least 2 or 3 different ways to get to your bug-out location. Your first route might be the fastest, but if you hit traffic, roadblocks, or violence, you need alternatives. This means knowing the back roads in your area, any off-road trails, and any potential shortcuts you can take. Relying on just one main highway could put you in a dangerous situation if things go south. So always plan multiple escape routes. And here's a big one. Don't rely solely on GPS. In a grid-down scenario, GPS satellites might fail, or the signal could be jammed or unavailable. You need to know how to navigate without electronics. This means getting comfortable with topographic maps and a compass. Take some time to practice these old-school navigation skills, because in a real bug-out situation, they could save your life. If you're familiar with the natural landmarks, rivers, mountains, ridgelines, that exist along your planned routes, that's even better. Another thing to be aware of is choke points. These are places like bridges, tunnels, and narrow mountain passes where traffic or people could easily bottleneck during a crisis. Choke points are dangerous because they leave you vulnerable to ambush or getting stuck in a crowd. If your route includes any choke points, make sure you have contingency plans for bypassing them, or at least have a strategy for how you'll deal with them if you have no choice but to pass through. Be sure to consider caching supplies along your route. This means hiding waterproof containers with food, water, and medical supplies in predetermined locations along your bug-out path. These supply caches can act as a backup if you lose your gear or if the journey takes longer than expected. It's like having secret resupply points that can help you keep moving without having to carry everything on your back from the start. Just be sure to mark their locations carefully so you don't forget where they are. Now let's shift gears and talk about the mental toll of bugging out, because this is one of the most challenging aspects of survival that people often underestimate. Sure, we all think about the physical exhaustion that comes with walking for miles, but what about the psychological strain of leaving everything behind and stepping into the unknown? It's a massive mental challenge, and if you're not prepared for it, it can break you faster than anything else. The first mental hurdle you'll face is decision fatigue. When you're bugging out, every decision feels critical. Do you go left or right at this fork in the road? Do you stop for the night here or keep moving? Is this water source safe to drink from? When you're constantly making high-stakes decisions under stress, your brain gets tired. Over time, this leads to poor judgment, mistakes, and even panic. That's why it's so important to plan ahead as much as possible and practice making decisions under pressure. By doing this now, you'll build the mental toughness needed to make smart choices when it really matters. Another major factor is uncertainty. When you're bugging out, you're constantly facing the unknown. You don't know what dangers lie ahead, whether you'll find shelter, food, or water, or whether the situation is going to get worse before it gets better. That constant uncertainty can lead to anxiety and even panic, especially if you're responsible for the safety of others. You have to stay mentally sharp and keep your anxiety in check, which is easier said than done when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. Then there's the issue of isolation. Bugging out often means leaving behind your support network. Your friends, neighbors, and maybe even family members. You're out there, potentially on your own or with a small group, and that can be incredibly lonely. Human beings are social creatures, and we rely on our connections with others for emotional support. When you're isolated in a high-stress situation, the psychological toll can be crushing. Loneliness, fear, and uncertainty can start to mess with your head, making it harder to stay focused on survival. You will also probably be dealing with the constant fear of what's around the next corner. Whether it's the possibility of encountering hostile people, wildlife, or simply bad weather, fear is always present when you're bugging out. You have to be on high alert all the time, constantly scanning your surroundings for threats. This heightened state of awareness can be mentally exhausting. Over time, it wears you down, and you become more likely to make mistakes or miss important details. Staying vigilant without letting fear take over is a delicate balance that's hard to maintain over long periods. After hearing all of this, it should be clear why I say that bugging out should be your last resort. It's not the action hero scenario that people imagine. It's not a chance to test your wilderness skills or go on an exciting adventure. Bugging out is hard, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And the truth is, in many situations, you're better off staying where you are. Your home is your most secure and stocked location. You have access to your supplies, food, water, medical gear, and the protection of four walls. You know the terrain around your home, and you can defend it if needed. Leaving all of that behind for the unknown is a massive gamble. Yes, there are situations where bugging out is absolutely necessary, but in most cases, staying put and sheltering in place is the smarter, safer option. If you do have to bug out, make sure you're as prepared as possible. Have a clear destination, plan multiple routes, keep your gear light but efficient, and be mentally ready for the challenges ahead. But always remember, bugging out isn't a first option. It's a last resort when staying in your home is no longer viable. So there you have it, the real, hard truth about bugging out. It's not easy, it's not glamorous, and it's certainly not something you should do unless you absolutely have to. The physical and mental toll it takes on you can push you to your limits, and without proper preparation, it can become a dangerous gamble. Bugging out should only be considered when there's no other option. Otherwise, sheltering in place is often the safer, smarter move. I hope this video has given you a clearer understanding of what it truly means to bug out and why it should be a last resort. If you found this information helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more survival tips and strategies. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook for even more updates. If you haven't already, sign up for my bi-weekly newsletter, where you'll receive a free copy of my ebook, Surviving Civil Unrest, a complete guide. Stay safe, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next video.